Hi, this is Makola Spokane, the leader and the founder of the Young Men Empowerment Forum. We are dealing with a topic that speaks about indicators of maturity in your life, indicators of maturity in this life. Now, maturity, very important. We have said that. And I've said it is a priority for every young man to desire to mature. But for you to see that you're making progress in maturity, there are some indicators, there's some signs that shows somebody's matured. And if you hearken unto those, that shows that you are getting matured. Now, I've mentioned a couple of indicators in the past, in part 1, in part 2, in part 3, part 4 yesterday as well. You'll realize that there are many things that will show the sign of maturity. And today, I want to embark on part 5 as I outline also some of the indicators today. The first indicator that I want to speak about that shows maturity in an individual, and it actually proves maturity in you, is that you prefer silence over arguments and fights when you are maturing. Now, in this life, there are things that will irritate you, and I'm sure you know that. There are people that will provoke you. There are situations that are actually annoying. Now, this is life. Now, because of that, you are going to be irritated sometimes. You are going to be provoked by people. And people are going to drag you into arguments. And there are people that are going to provoke you to want to fight you, or they want you to fight them. We have seen that. There are people that will talk bad about you. And some will accuse you of things that you never did. Now, because of that, and we are not living as individuals as in isolation, we are living amongst people, by the way. And people are of their own minds. People are of their own thoughts. People are of their own opinions as well. People will say things that may not be well with us. And that is provoking us. But when you are maturing, you'll realize that you start to prefer to become silent, even in situations that are provoking. You actually start to choose to be quiet, because silence is golden. And I must say that again, silence is golden. And sometimes when you're silent, it's not that you are a coward, it's because you are avoiding arguments and fights. But that's a sign of maturity. Now, people that are maturing, or they are matured, they will not drag themselves into fights, and they will not get into unnecessary arguments. And that is why people that are matured, even when somebody's arguing with them, they are actually not enhancing the argument by debating it. They may actually cut it short by agreeing with the person that is arguing a lot, so that they cannot argue further, because arguments are a waste of time. And that is why arguments, most of them, they lead into fights if there's nobody who's giving in. Now, I want to urge you as a young man that you learn to be silent, because silent is golden. And I must emphasize also that there are some times that you don't need to fight every battle that comes your way. You don't need to argue with everybody in this world. And I must emphasize that also, when you argue with fools, the people may not make a difference, because there are people that are just arguers, or people that provoke argument at all times. There are people that love arguing every single thing, even the thing that they can see clearly that this is like this, but they will argue it and be on the opposite side. And there are many people like that. Now, therefore, when you are maturing, you don't like arguments anymore. You don't stick yourself in arguments. Don't spend time arguing with people. You don't actually find yourself in fights because you don't actually enjoy fights. So therefore, as a young man, I want to urge you that even amongst your circle of friends, there are those that will argue with you. Please, to show a sign of maturity, don't engage yourself in too much arguments. Don't engage yourself in too much fights as well. Because by so doing, as I said, it's not indication that you're a coward. You're protecting yourself, by the way. And also, you're protecting the other person, because it may cause fights that may cause you to even injure other people. You may end up hating other people because of fights that emanate. And that is why we're having young men today that are in prison, not because they wanted to kill people, but because they were not matured enough to keep silent in the midst of arguments. They argued until they fought, and you find that the argument was not started by you, it was started by the other party. And the other party then provoked you to an extent that you used some dangerous weapon that killed the person without your intention. And at the end of the day, some of the young men end up in prison, waste their lives in prison because of the arguments that you've engaged yourself in. But maturity dictates that you actually argue less and keep silence instead of arguing. Arguments doesn't help, and arguments doesn't actually enhance any relationships. So therefore, even in your own relationship with your family, please avoid arguments, avoid fights, and that shows maturity in you. In your own family, if you're married, make sure that you avoid fights, you avoid arguments as well, because that shows lack of maturity when you're forever arguing and making sure that you're fighting at all times. Now, maturity will show that you argue less or even decide to keep silent when argument is being started. Lastly, your happiness don't depend on people. It depends on your own inner self. Now, when you are maturing, you realize that sometimes it's not people that will make you happy. You must decide yourself and have that inner happiness in you. When you've got your inner peace, you will have inner happiness. But that is not brought by the people outside. So therefore, you cannot forever look for people to bring happiness to you. It's not everybody who's interested in your case. It's not everybody who's interested in your situation. It's not everybody who's in the business of coming to make you happy. Because some don't even know what makes you happy. Some don't even know what makes you miserable. So therefore, it's very important as a young man to hearken unto maturity, to understand that your happiness is not depending on people. Now, there are some of you as a young man who would go and party the whole night. You'll go and visit friends at all times. And you'll go and garner a lot of company of people around you because you think that they will actually bring happiness. There are some of you who are spending the rest of your lives in parties every day. You go to party every day. You're wasting your time. You could be doing something better, but you're going to parties because you think that is where you're going to find happiness. Now, as a young man, some of you are actually spending more time in shebeens, in nightclubs, because you think that your happiness shall be brought about by the people that you're gathering around. But I want to urge you this, that when you mature and grow, you start to realize that happiness should not come from the people outside. It must come from the inner self. And when a happiness comes from the inner self, it is very sustainable. Because happiness that comes from the outside, from the people, it's not sustainable, because when those people are not there for you anymore, you cannot be happy. When those people desert you, when they people start to walk away from you, you become miserable. And that is why, as a young man, I want to urge you that don't invest your happiness in a girlfriend. Don't invest your happiness in a boyfriend as a girl as well. Don't invest your happiness in a relationship, because your happiness should not depend on a relationship. It must be a happiness that comes from within, intrinsic happiness, and when it is there, it is sustainable, and you can actually influence others with your happiness, because happiness is infectious too. I want to mention that please don't depend on people, because people that depend on people for happiness, as I said, they forever spend their time in parties. And when a party is not happening, they're miserable at all times. And when they are not in the midst of the people, they're miserable at all times. When people withdraw themselves from them, they actually start pointing a finger at themselves and blame themselves and say, why this person walked away is because of me. Now, you are actually beating up yourself for nothing. Because people decide when to come into your life, and people decide also when to walk away. And when they walk away, let them go. And let your happiness not depend on them. Some of you might have actually lost a relationship. And somebody has told you they don't love you anymore. Let them go, because your happiness should not depend on them. Some of you, your happiness depends on friends. Some of you, your happiness depends on people around you. And I want to urge you that please don't invest your happiness in people, because people may not be able to fulfill you. Generate happiness from within, and you'll find that your happiness will be sustainable in your life. I want to end up here today. Your host, Makona Spokane. Thank you very much for listening to us and being part of this great topic. May the good Lord bless you, and cheers for now.